This next book is, it's one of those books where it's kind of like, oh, how the mighty have fallen. Because I used to love Night Vale so much, as you can see by the Night Vale painting that I have on my wall. I just, I used to love this series so much, but Jeffrey Craner, not Jeffrey, is it Jeffrey? No, it's not Jeffrey, it's Joseph, I'm pretty sure. One of the two of them just can't acknowledge when enough is enough, and the fact that having the Apache tracker in your show is not inclusion, that's just racism. But whatever, what do we know? We're just the fans. Um, so this book is just called Welcome to Night Vale, and it came out in 2015, and it takes place between or it takes place after the episode where they through the narrow place. I can't remember what number that is, but after that episode is when this book takes place. And yeah, so a lot of this book is really just descriptions, so I won't really get into those. Cecil makes an appearance throughout the book. There are parts where Cecil is like doing a broadcast, and the font changes and everything like that. And like, for example, all hail, all plant your face into the fallow earth and weep into its prosperity, it concluded before cutting the ribbon to officially open the new downtown roller rink. A big thanks to the Glow Cloud for its speech, and of course, all hail the mighty Glow Cloud. Yeah. So Jackie Ferraro, she runs the pawn shop. She's been 19 for about as long as she can remember now. Her life is quiet, the pawn shop and the community radio. She never refuses an item, and I do not remember what price she always offers for the item, but she always offers the same price, but sometimes, like, the things that people give her, like, I'm pretty sure Diane Craner, who's also a character in this book, not Diane Craner, I can't remember what her last name is, Creighton, Diane Creighton. I'm pretty sure later she gives her, like, a tear on a tissue. If you've listened to the podcast, you know how this goes. So the man in the tan jacket holding a deerskin suitcase approached her. He called himself Everett, and then he called himself Emmett. His name begins with an E. He gives her a sheet of paper with King City on it, and then his name is Elliot, and then he leaves. And Jackie can't remember his face or his name. All she knows is that he's not tall, but also not short, and he is not thin, but not fat. Things from Night Vale. Diane Creighton is a single mother to a 15-year-old named Josh who is still trying to decide what form he takes. Literally. Josh can literally transform his body into like a bubble. And Diane, because she's his mom, always knows what he is. It doesn't matter if he takes on a really scary form or if he just looks normal. She always knows. Diane loves her son, but whenever he asks about his dad, it makes Diane sad. And we don't really know why. She can't seem to remember her dad. Jackie literally cannot put down the piece of paper. It's changing her life because now she can't really grab things with that hand, and it's making her crazy. And she doesn't really want to learn about him, but the paper. Weirdness at Diane's job, which for Night Vale is normal. Who cares? There used to be a guy named Evan who worked there. Apparently not. No one else can remember him. Jackie, for some reason, also can only write King City on things. So she can't really do her job because she can't write down the tickets for each of the pawned items. Yeah. Diane also has a paper. And she keeps seeing this dude named Troy around town. And Troy is Josh's dad. And he left when Josh was 1. But now he's back. But Josh hasn't noticed him yet, which is good for Jackie. Jackie goes to her, not Jackie, which is good for Diane, I'm sorry. Jackie goes to her mom, and because she doesn't really remember much of her life, like, she's been 19 for fucking ever. If you've listened to Night Vale, then you know that Cecil was also 19 for fucking ever, but then one day he was just, like, when he was an intern at the radio station, he was 19, but then one day he was just suddenly not 19, and now he is the person who runs the radio. So, yeah. Jackie goes to see Carlos because they're already experimenting on the paper. Jackie's paper is added. Parts of the paper make sense, even if the whole is confusing. They could go to King City, but leaving Night Vale is hard. There's only one highway into Night Vale. I think it's Route 800. And, Diane isn't sure if the guy is Troy because, like, she interacts with him and he doesn't seem to remember her. And, yeah. Also, the guy that Diane was talking about, Evan, he is the man in the tan jacket. I don't know why only Diane can remember him, but why does anything happen in Night Vale? Dana, the mayor of Night Vale, her brother also has a paper. Josh also believes in mountains, which you're not supposed to do if you live in Night Vale. Yeah, hang on. John Peters, the farmer, says to stay away from the man in the tan jacket because he's dangerous and he keeps lurking around Diane. Josh wants to meet Troy, even though Diane doesn't want him to. Evan wants Diane's help because she's the only one who can remember him. I apologize for looking away from the camera so much, but unlike Hitchhiker's Guide, I can't remember much of this book because I will get to why Night Vale, particularly now more than ever, annoys the fuck out of me after I talk about It Devours. Yeah, so, Jackie and Diane both need to talk to Troy, but they don't want to work together because Jackie is 19 and irrational and angry, as 19-year-olds are wont to be, and Diane acts like a mother because she is a mother and understands that Jackie is impulsive and kind of annoying, but weren't we all at 19? Jackie starts snooping about Diane. Steve Carlsberg, Cecil's brother-in-law, knows things about King City, and Diane and Jackie keep running into each other because they have the same goal. So they both go to the library, which you are not supposed to do because the librarians will literally eat you alive. And the stuff about King City is in the forbidden materials, and they get Troy's record and they get the King City shoebox, and there really isn't a whole lot more bonding people together than trying to escape from the librarians. And the shoebox is useless, but King City seems to be disappearing for some reason. And they go to Leanne Hart, the lady with the hatchet, who wrote about King City, but she doesn't really want to talk about it because she just wants to talk about how internet bloggers are ruining newspapers, so she attacks internet bloggers with her hatchet, in case you forgot. Josh took Diane's car and he's gone. So Josh found Diane's paper because for some reason Diane could put hers down. He found Diane's paper and he's gone. And Diane tries to get on a bus to go to King City, but the bus, it just loops back around 800 and comes back to Night Vale. And for some reason, I think Troy is also Jackie's dad. All right. And Jackie doesn't want to go to King City, but Diane convinces her. And there are flamingos all throughout the story that Carlos and his scientists were also experimenting on. And they touch the flamingos, and now they can go to King City, which is cool, I guess. When they go to King City, everyone is Troy for some reason, except for Evan. Evan is the mayor of King City. And after this episode, I did notice that the man in the tan jacket stopped showing up because his thing was solved. And if only everything were this easy in Night Vale. But no. So after they figure that out, Jackie turns 21, which is great. She skips a whole 2 years, which is cool. And she can continue life working at the pawn shop. And Josh still has not settled on a form, but he's 15. He'll figure it out. And yeah, so my feelings towards this book are hard to explain. I enjoy it. It reminds me of the Night Vale that I love, most of it anyway. I read this book for the channel mostly so that I could rant about Night Vale. So Joseph Fink is kind of an asshole. He can't really seem to understand why the Apache Tracker is racist. Also, Carlos's voice actor has been very busy lately, so rather than just I was lying. We're not going to talk about it after I read It Devours. We're going to talk about it right now. Rather than just recasting the voice like they did at the beginning when Jeffrey Craner was playing him, they just wrote Carlos's character out of the show, which essentially ruins all of Cecil's character development for seasons like 2 and 3, because those whole seasons are, for Cecil at least, always about Carlos and how Carlos is missing and how Carlos isn't really around. And at the end of season, I want to say 3 or 4, they get married. Like it's a whole thing. But no, Jesus fucking Christ. In case you don't know, Carlos's voice actor used to be Jeffrey Craner, who's the co-writer of Night Vale. And they found Dylan Marin, and Dylan, the canon reason for why Carlos's voice changed is because he got throat spiders and had to get his vocal cords changed out. Why can't you just do that again? Also, it felt like at the beginning that the point of Carlos was that he was supposed to be a source of normalcy for the reader or the listener in all of this craziness. But no, Carlos is just as weird as the rest of them. Like, what the fuck? And the show is just like annoying at this point. This book is not annoying or grinding, but like it feels like they write episodes with no end goal in mind. Like, I don't mean to make this comparison because it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges, or not even oranges, kind of like comparing apples to carrots. But in like Elder Scrolls, there's a lot of things in Elder Scrolls that we as fans would love to have answered. What's Akravir? Where did the dragons come from? What is to the south of Tamriel? Like, what are all these other continents about? We would love to have answers to those. However, like, you gotta keep some of the mysterious things mysterious. But with Night Vale, it feels like they don't even have an answer. At least with Elder Scrolls, it seems like the writers of that particular series, they know what's in Akavir. They know what happened to Uriel, I want to say 5. They know what happened to him. They know where the dragons came from. But with this, it feels like the faceless old woman who secretly lives in your house, it's just to be weird. Fuck it, it's fine. And fuck it is fine for like difficult situations that you've decided to just, you know what, whatever happens, happens. That is when fuck it is a good idea. When trying to write a coherent story and you want people to stay engaged, fuck it is not a good philosophy to have. Like, Cecil's backstory, for example. Why can't Cecil look into mirrors? What does Cecil look like? What do his bosses look like? Because all we know is that they're like some sort of weird mass of, I think, tentacles. I don't know if the tentacles thing came from Joseph Fink and Jeffrey Craner or if that's a projection by the fan base. Because there's, in like the least kinky way possible, there's a lot of tentacle imagery when it comes to Cecil. Like, there's a book about the faceless old woman who secretly lives in your home coming out, and I genuinely can't decide if I want to buy it or not. It Devours is so grinding and so annoying. And like, Cecil really isn't in it. Carlos is kind of in it, but I don't even really know when It Devours takes place, because Carlos acknowledges Cecil as his husband, I know it takes place after that. Because Carlos is still in the show, I know it takes place before then. I know when the book came out, but the episode after Through the Narrow Place is called Epilogue because it's an epilogue to this book. That episode doesn't make sense unless you've read this book. I don't know. Like, the book is absurdist, but not in a comedy way. If Night Vale isn't something you're into, I don't think you will like this book because there's a lot of context that you'll be missing. Granted, it is absurdist, so why the fuck do you need the context? But for like a lot of the characters, like John Peters, you know, the farmer, and Steve Carlsberg, and Cecil, and Carlos, and yeah. If you've never heard of the show, don't pick up this book first. That's what I'll say. Oh, how the mighty have fallen.